Thank you. I think we'll come back to some of these themes. I want to officially release the panel from their diplomacy. People are being so careful about what they say. And,
don't worry.
Don't worry, because Steve is good. Steve, I'm relieved that you're the next person I'm going to ask a question to. And don't be shy. Okay, so here's my easy question for you, which is, as you look at this theme of benefit versus risk and the safety issues, and you're so familiar with the FDA and its workings, how do you see the balance between getting information to doctors, really being a really trusted source of information for doctors, versus regulating medical practice and telling them what to do and not to do? Have we gone too far in terms of getting in the middle of the patient-doctor relationship, or have we not gone far enough? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, interesting question. First of all, I personally do not believe that innovation and safety are mutually exclusive. And, you know, sometimes they're poised that way, as if you emphasize safety, you're going to chill innovation. If you emphasize innovation, you're going to undermine safety. I don't think that's right. I think we can have both. And I actually am more optimistic now about this than I have been at any time in the past decade. And I think some of it has to do with an evolving culture involving academics and industry and the regulators that has improved the situation. I would point out that some of the problems, and, you know, Pete, you were being very, you know, delicate about it where there hasn't been transparency. Let's be frank. There have been situations where safety problems have arisen. They were not shared promptly with the medical community, and things got worse and worse, and it eventually blew up into a catastrophe. Well, I worked very hard on the Fda Amendments Act, which I think everybody here is familiar with, that now will require, in the very near future, clinical trial results to be made available. That's an enormous advance that I believe helps everybody in the field, because it means that the information that's available is available widely and to everybody. We cannot make good decisions about risk versus benefit unless we have all of the information transparently available. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to make a good decision, but at least we have a chance to make a good decision when it's all available. So I think that this legal requirement now for transparency is a huge step forward for medicine. The other step forward that I think is underappreciated by people is the REMS. And I worked very hard with Congress on REMS, and I actually worked on it both for innovation and safety. And I'm going to give you an example. It's a drug that is in cardiovascular space, dofetilide, which is a very risky drug, was responsibly marketed with a REMS that requires specialized training. You know, only certain doctors can use it, and it's under this kind of restricted access program, and it has not gotten in the trouble that everybody feared. If we hadn't done the REMS, I think that there's no FDA panel in the world that would have approved that drug. And so we've given ourselves now a safety net. We can take a drug that has benefits in some people and a lot of risk, and we can find a way to bring it forward so that those that can benefit get the drug, and those that will be harmed don't get the drug. That's an enormous step forward that I hope that we continue to develop. It's not perfect, but it's made a lot of progress. And then finally, you know, I was a big proponent of the Physician Payment Sunshine Act. And again, Pete has to deal with this every day when he calls up somebody and he wants to get comment about, you know, some article, whether it be benefit or risk. And he's asking himself the question, as all good journalists do, what are the ties between that individual and the product that's being considered? Well, we're going to have all that information in the public domain. That's also useful for those of us that read the medical literature, because we can know, in fact, if there is a conflict of interest, and we can factor that in. Doesn't mean the person's wrong. It's just something that we ought to all know about. Now, you ask about labels, and I want to get back to your principal question here. And frankly, this is an area that we need as a medical and commercial community to figure out. because I can tell you that physicians do not read drug labels. They don't read them. They don't know what's in there. And, you know, we know that these kinds of errors, I can't tell you how often this comes up, where, you know, we happen to use a lot of rifampin because we see a lot of endocarditis in my hospital, and the vast majority of physicians don't know that it's a 3A4 inducer and that it will essentially, you know, wipe out blood levels of many other drugs. If you don't know that, you hurt patients. We have got to find a better way to educate physicians about benefits and risks of drugs and their side effects. And the label, I mean, who here, raise your hand, what last time, if within the last year, you've read a drug label from top to bottom, you know? Yeah, well, you know, the people who have, a handful of you have, but I can tell you, amongst practicing physicians, if you ask that question, nobody's going to raise their hand. And so I think that we need an initiative with the agency to figure out a way to communicate to the public. And media may have a role to play. I'm not sure all the roles that have to be played out, but I think it can be done. I want to say one more thing about benefit versus risk that is terribly important and poorly communicated, and I'm probably as much to blame as everybody else is benefit versus risk is in the context of what you're treating. And there's an example I'd like to use. And I'm not an oncologist, but if somebody developed a drug for treating pancreatic cancer, and when you gave people the drug, 10% of them died within an hour, and the other 90% were cured of pancreatic cancer, would that be a good drug or a bad drug? And, you know, it might be a good drug. And, you know, again, what the part of the equation that we don't always get is that drugs that produce life-saving benefits, we can tolerate a lot of risk. As long as it's transparent, as long as I can sit down with the patient and say, look, if I give you this drug, this oncological drug, there's a pretty good chance you're going to develop heart failure. We're going to damage your heart, but we got a pretty good chance we're going to cure your cancer, and the patient and the doctor can then make an educated decision about that. And so the nuances of benefit risk are not being communicated well, and it's caused us tremendous problems. I wanted to make one other comment about the issue of safety versus innovation that is perhaps a little bit out of the box. But, you know, I've wondered about what do you do with drugs that you really want to get to the market because they have enormous public benefits, but there's a lot of uncertainty about their benefit versus risk. And something we've not done in this country, but I think we could do, is to allow for limited term approval, where we would say this is a risky drug, you can bring it to market, but you have to complete this, and this studies within X amount of time, and if you don't complete them, then the drug is going to disappear from the market. This is a huge potential way to spur innovation. The problem is in the past, what's often happened is phase 4 commitments, as I think everybody in the room knows, have not always been kept. In fact, the majority of the time they actually are not kept. But if we had the teeth of an automatic withdrawal, if you didn't do the appropriate safety studies, I think we might bring innovative medicines to market sooner, and they may turn out to be a very good equation. Some of the drugs that were introduced that people were really worried about have turned out to be spectacular drugs. Now, you're an endocrinologist. You know, there was a huge controversy about metformin because of what happened with fenformin. People were scared to death of metformin for diabetes. Turned out to be a terrific drug, and it's the drug we now consider our first-line drug. Well, we need ways to get those kind of drugs on the market, but also to protect patients, and I think we haven't gotten it exactly right.
Terrific. Thank you, Steve.